This is All of It. I'm Allison Stewart, live from the WNYC studios in Soho. Thank you for sharing part of your day with us. I'm really grateful that you're here. On today's show, actor Riz Ahmed has a new series called Bait. He'll be here in studio to preview it. Amy DuBois-Barnett joins us to talk about her debut novel, If I Ruled the World. And Brooklyn artist Leonardo Drew joins us to talk about his work at the two new shows in our area that are featuring it. That's the plan, so let's get this started with Eat to Hustle. Our next guest, Robin Arzon, made a pretty dramatic career shift. She left her job as a corporate lawyer to pursue her passion. She's now the VP of Fitness for Peleton, an amazing instructor, an author, and a speaker, and now you can add a cookbook author, a vegan cookbook. Eat to Hustle is all about plant-based, protein-rich recipes, the kind of food she relies on to fuel workouts, long days, and everything in between, including 2 children under 6. Arzon is a vegan. She also lives with type 1 diabetes. Through these recipes, she's trying to push back on the idea that you need meat to hit your protein goals, or that eating plant-based meals means giving up flavors or foods you grew up with. You see, Robin has Puerto Rican and Cuban roots, and that influence shows up throughout the book. Robin Arzon is here with us now to talk about that shift from law to fitness and how being intentional about food became such a central part of her routine. Robin, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Listeners, we like to hear from you. What are your favorite plant-based meals? Have you found good substitutes for dishes you love? Are you thinking about making the switch and you have questions, or maybe you're just a fan of Robin's? Our phone number is 212-433-9692, 212-433-WNYC. Robin, what was that moment that you said, I've had enough with the law and I would like to pursue something else?
I think that there were thousands of small moments.
Really?
I wouldn't say it was like jumping off a cliff. It was probably like tiny little inflection points. And I fell in love with movement and running. And I remember sitting in my office adjacent to Central Park. I could see, a sliver of Central Park from my window. I was a junior associate, so no fancy office there. But I found that pull to count down the hours of my day until I could move my body. And I thought, gosh, this is such an inverse relationship with how I should be leading my life. And then I just started to prioritize being able to pay my New York City rent with something that I felt impassioned by, which was running and moving.
How did your diet change when you became a full-time fitness professional?
So, I was working really long hours at the law firm, and it was seamless web, as it was called at the time. Delivery service food was pretty much breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Yeah. And it was during that time, actually, that I started transitioning slowly, again, over a 2-year period to a plant-based diet. It started with a lunchtime salad at the local bodega. And one day the chicken was undercooked, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a swap tomorrow. And I swapped chicken for black beans. And it started just with lunch. And then it migrated to my dinner time order. Okay, maybe I'll try Indian food or Thai food or, some foods that I think are going to give me energy but aren't going to be meat-based. And it was exploration. It wasn't like I went home one day and I threw out everything in my kitchen and pantry. It really was iterative.
Did you notice that you felt differently?
I recovered from my workouts faster. I slept better. I had more energy. I didn't have that 4 p.m. energy slump. And I realized that my digestion was improved. And again, this wasn't overnight. This was over a few months. But I did start to see those improvements after consistent plant-based eating after a few weeks.
Okay, so you decide to go in. You're going to go for it. What was the biggest learning curve in figuring out how to properly fuel your workouts?
It was more so trial and error. We all have our go-to meals, our go-to foods, or even nostalgic things that that's how things have always been done in this house, right? So I had to think ahead for Hungry Robin. I'm always thinking ahead for Hungry Robin. So now I can just speak to how I do things now. I normally do a semblance of meal preparation on a Sunday when I have a little bit more time, mainly preparing proteins like air-fried tofu, or I'll make my own seitan. And again, a lot of these recipes are in Eat to Hustle. Actually, all of them are my cookbook. And then I will pair them with grains and with veggies at the time I'm going to eat them. And I make protein bagels, and that helps me when I'm running around New York City like I am today. I throw a protein bagel in my bag, and I always have a smoothie every single morning, and I usually drink half before my workout, half after, and I'm usually doing multiple workouts a day with my work at Peloton, and so it's really bringing a number of small meals with me.
As you became vegan, how did it force you to become creative in the kitchen?
Well, what I realized is that I could still maintain a lot of the flavors I was nostalgic for and even the textures that I was craving, but upgrade them or swap them with plant-based ingredients that had protein and fiber. I found that it aided my satiety, it aided my digestion. And, thankfully now we're having more of the protein and fiber conversation. But when I started to transition, it felt like I felt like no man's land in terms of, I felt like I was on an island alone.
Right. Speaking Martian to people.
Yes, exactly. Especially as a high-performing athlete, right? Yeah. Like I didn't just want to be sitting munching on a bag of spinach leaves. I needed something that sustained multiple hours of training a day. And thankfully, there are pioneers like Rich Roll and Scott Jurek and people who have been really incredible endurance athletes for many, many years before I even embarked on that journey. And I would say the biggest thing for me was maintaining a minimum amount of protein for every single meal. So that's really why I embarked on writing Eat to Hustle, because I wanted to simplify it for folks. Every single recipe has the macronutrient breakdown, so you're going to know exactly how many grams of protein you're getting. And it's all going to be pretty simple ingredients that you can find in your pantry or your local grocery store.
We're speaking with Robin Arsan. Her new cookbook is Eat to Hustle. It came out last week, and it features plant-based, protein-rich recipes. You consulted a nutritionist for your book, Delina Soto, and she pops up here and there with her little bits of wisdom. Why did you pick Delina?
First of all, she's a fellow Latina. I wanted somebody who had a point of view on, rooted in science, but also understanding culture and understanding that food is food relates to community and feelings of home. And, she has been able to guide clients through her career on that journey. And I don't expect to take the emotionality out of food. In fact, I want to infuse joy with practicality. And that is exactly how I approach eating. And I wanted a registered dietitian to get her eyes on the book, just so folks would have some reassurance that this isn't just me making it up, although I've pressure tested it, with over a decade of training. But it's also rooted in science.
Let's talk to Nicole, who's calling from Kew Gardens. Hey, Nicole, thanks for taking the time to call all of it.
Hi, Allison. Love your show. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
So our whole family, I have 4 children and a husband, and our whole family is vegetarian, although my second son last year at age 15 decided that he was going to be a meat eater, much to our chagrin. But hey, you do you, bro, okay? So he is a meat eater, and I cook his stuff on separate pans and things like that. But he's his own person, so there's that. And I know a lot of ways to get, because I've been a vegetarian for almost 30 years now, how to get plant-based protein. But as I've entered this darling and beautiful perimenopausal state that I'm in, I've heard so much about collagen, and I'm wondering how a vegetarian/vegan can get collagen from a vegetarian diet.
Yeah, that's hi. Thank you so much for calling. That's a great point. There are supplement companies that sell plant-based forms of collagen. Jury's out. I would do your research on the efficacy on whether the absorption is the same. But generally, they're products from the sea that help with our collagen production as we age.
Listeners, we want to hear from you. What are your favorite plant-based meals? Have you ever found a good substitute for dishes you love? Do you have creative ways to thinking about the kitchen, or are you a fan of Robin's? Our number is 212-433-9692, 212-433-WNYC. This text says, I make something I call kitchen sink, a can of minestrone soup that I supplement with lots of red beans and chickpeas, and I top it off with salsa. Yummy and filling.
Love that.
Love that. You and Delina both weigh in on the biggest vegan myths. First of all, when you talk to her and when you put this together, where do these myths come from?
A lot of times they're related to something that just went wild on TikTok or went wild on the news. And oftentimes it's related to a study or two and really unpacking, what was the control group? What was the causation or correlation there, right? Like, let's unpack that. And also, we shouldn't discount individually how we feel, right? Like we could report on study after study, but if that way of eating doesn't sit well with you in digestion, doesn't aid sleep, if you don't feel like it's aiding your energy, then that's all the sample size you need to have.
What are some of the myths that you'd like to bust? Give me 3.
Well, number 1, that plant-based foods don't have protein. Plants themselves have protein. And eating a variety of plant-based foods gets you to the full amino acid profile that will put on muscle. Since becoming a plant-based athlete, I've probably put on 12 pounds of muscle in about a decade. That's with a lot of hard work and intentional eating. But it's absolutely possible to maintain muscle mass as we age with plant-based foods. Number 2, that soy is inherently bad. There are entire communities around the world that eat soy on a regular basis, and they do not have increased risk of cancer. And I would just say, generally speaking, you want to know where your foods are coming from. Or organic foods, to the extent that we can source them properly, are usually a better option. At least that's what it is in my household. And I would say number 3, that it needs to be overly complicated or that you have to relinquish foods that you love. A lot of the recipes in Eat to Hustle are actually comfort foods that I was nostalgic for in the 90s. Things that my Cuban refugee mama was like, no, we're not getting that. You're not getting that. Literally there's a whole purse snack chapter, and there are mini energy muffins, for example, that used to be these prepackaged muffins from the 90s that my mom was like, we're not getting that. You can have rice and beans for dinner. So I created a recipe, that has, 12 grams of protein per serving. And it is a nod to kind of more fun foods that we might have had back in the day.
I was going to ask you, because about your Cuban and your Puerto Rican roots, there's pernil. There's a vegetarian pernil in here.
Yes, there's tofu chicharrones, which is directly from my Christmas holiday table.
So vegetarian pernil plate.
Yep.
Explain to us what you think is the magic ingredient in here.
I would say it's the adobo and the sazon and the seasonings, right? And so we were able to recreate pernil, which is normally a roasted pork, and infuse it with protein and make sure that you have the maduros, you have arroz con gandules, the rice and beans, and that there are many points in the book. We have a flan recipe that has no dairy and is pumped up with protein. And side note, my mom said that my abuela Carmita would have been very proud. So that was the only vote of confidence I needed to get that book out into the world, knowing that my abuelas, my grandmothers, would be proud. But there are a lot of ways to I call myself a remix artist in the kitchen. And in the same way that I hope to empower folks to move their bodies with Peleton, I hope to empower folks in the kitchen to make choices and just experiment. And we don't have to relinquish the recipes that we grew up with.
We're talking to Robin Arsan. Her new cookbook is called Eat to Hustle. Let's talk to James in Gowanus. Hey, James, thanks for making the time to call all of it.
Hi there. So thanks for letting me on. I wanted to ask, because I heard in the introduction that she is a type 1 diabetic. And as a type 1 diabetic myself, I know that that condition has a lot of impact on people's fitness and on, how often they choose to control their diet. So, if it's not too personal, I'd love to ask her how being type 1 diabetic impacted her writing this book.
Yeah, thank you. So the carb counts certainly aid my fellow type 1 diabetes, I like to say. The carb counts obviously are relevant to how much insulin we are going to give ourselves in whatever system or shots that we are using. I'm personally on a closed loop system. I was already an athlete when I was diagnosed as an adult. So I was very body aware of how different foods affect my energy, how different types of movement affect my energy. And then, of course, after being diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic, that became even more granular and nuanced. I would say fueling as a plant-based athlete has really helped me with my T1D management because my carbs are almost always paired with protein and fiber, which in fact impacts glucose spikes. And I pair meals that are more carb heavy around my movement and really prioritize protein ahead of everything. So, I would encourage folks who are T1D to experiment with some of the recipes in this book, and you are going to be armed with the tools of macronutrient breakdowns for every single recipe.
Let's talk to Vanessa in Brooklyn. Hey, Vanessa, thanks for calling all of it.
Hey, I'm just calling because I'm a huge fan of Robin's. Robin, I've been riding with you since 23rd Street when I was preparing for my wedding and trying to get extra fit. And now I'm still riding with you, I don't know, 12, 13 years later, 11 years, whatever, however many years it's been. And I also have a 9-year-old daughter who's also named Athena. But I just wanted to say what resonates with me the most about you, among so many things, that you're a badass and all those things, but that you preach about getting stronger as we get older. And as I'm almost 50 now, that empowers me every day.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that acknowledgement. And thank you for rocking with me, over a decade later.
I rode with Robin this morning. What can I say? Okay. In your book, Eat to Hustle, you have a section called Shop Smarter, Not Harder. Like our audience, public radio audience, they know what tofu is. Yeah. But when you're thinking about the spices that you should have in your kitchen, what are some spices that you should have on hand?
Ooh, don't underestimate miso for umami, nutritional yeast for additional B12, and that cheesy boost without the dairy. Coconut aminos sprinkled on tofu, broiled for 15 minutes is incredible. It develops this like nice sweet glaze with a little bit of salt. Of course, the spice that I kind of go to most readily is usually sazon and adobo, and that kind of gives me like more of a Latin vibe. But mojo is also something that I make often. I get a really high quality oil, some citrus and some garlic, and that will refresh. The beauty of the plant-based proteins is that they will absorb almost any flavor palette. They are blank canvases. So that gives us a lot of room to play in the seasoning aisle.
One of our listeners says, "Hi, Robin, big fan. Are there protein powders Robin recommends?"
I get this question a lot. I think do your research, make sure that it's third-party tested. I really like Jason Walsh's company, Rise 311. It's on the pricier side, but I know that he really vets and studies or gets his product tested. And that vanilla is just like kind of a go-to for me.
You're from Philly, from the 215. So there's a cheesesteak in here.
I had to do a cheesesteak. Come on now. One of the things I had to mourn when I became plant-based was there were not going to be any more Pat and Gino's runs for me. So yes, I did a cheesesteak recipe, and I hope I made Philly proud.
We actually have somebody calling from Philly. Let's talk to Connie. Hi, Connie. Thanks for calling all of it.
Hi, Robin. Hi, Allison. Robin, I love you. I love you. So, representing Philly. I have a quick question about, I'm wondering if you recommend any ingredients or particular meals to help with DOMS. I'm like 36 hours out from one of your glutes and leg strength classes, and I'm struggling.
I hear you. Okay, well, protein's going to help. Water and hydration is going to help. I would say I always add dehydrated tart cherry into my water. And I also increase my creatine. I'm on like 20 grams of creatine a day, split up across like 4 very large Stanley cups. I think that, protein is obviously going to help. The amino acid profile is going to help with any muscle tears and things like that. But I'd say it's more about consistent fueling, sleep, and a little bit of edge you're going to get from things like the tart cherry juice.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about was the book is called Eat to Hustle. And for a little while, hustle got a little bit of a bad rap. I'm pro-hustle, by the way. What does hustle mean to you?
Hustle means you are somebody willing to define your own finish line and also name and claim when you need to pull back a little bit. Discipline doesn't mean going hard all the time without any parameters or without any boundaries. So my hustle is remarkably consistent. It involves grit and work ethic. It involves accepting the adage that complaints are not conversation, but also my no is my no. And it's a full sentence. And so if I need to pull back, if I need to sleep, I don't believe that we're in glorifying doing more with less sleep or less boundaries. But I do think that hustle is something that is incredibly admirable, because I think that the way we can reshape it and make it kind of, if I can be hustle's PR rep in this day and age, that I think it includes self-care.
This says, thank you for these flavorful tofu suggestions. Your kids eat this way.
They do. My whole household does.
What's their favorite thing?
I would say, honestly, the dessert chapter. If I would make the cinnamon buns every day, they would be thrilled. And the reason I created that cinnamon bun recipe is because I wanted, it's 10 grams of protein per serving for the cinnamon buns, and they're still cinnamon buns, right? Like that's a treat. That's a special occasion thing. But and I want them to see joy in food. I don't want them to start counting numbers and think, oh, everything has to be this scientific experiment of getting my protein intake. For them, it's play. They cook with me. They've been cooking in the kitchen with me since they were a few weeks old. And I would say that, the creamy pasta, the paletas, and actually arroz con gandules. They're big rice and beans fans.
You're not a professional chef.
At all.
But it's clear that you love cooking when you talk about it, when you write about it. What made you decide to write a cookbook?
The number one question I get asked from folks is, how do you get your protein? Or how do I maintain my energy levels? And I just wanted to put it in a book that has beautiful photography, a lot of energy. It has This Kitchen is for Dancing playlist. I mean, I wanted every little touch point to feel like you were coming over into my home for a meal.
You spent time in the corporate world, working crazy hours. You work crazy hours now, I know. What advice do you have for people to try to maintain sort of an intentional diet when you have a demanding job?
I would say plan today for the version of yourself who's going to be grateful for how you acted tomorrow. And in that, I mean, it's small little wins. So whether it's planning for when you're going to be hungry later, putting a little purse snack in your purse, making double of a recipe, freezing half of it so you don't have to think about it in 2 weeks. I do that often, especially with the protein breads and the protein bagels. Give yourself grace. And I would say consistency over intensity is the real flex. I love an intense workout. I love high energy things, but sometimes you just need to throttle and give yourself grace for making the simple next decision.
My guest has been Robin Arson. The name of her cookbook is Eat to Hustle. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you. I'm thrilled.